¡Hijo de la chingada!
The film begins by showing three sheriffs chasing a man. One of the three sheriffs then shoots the man in the leg so that he can no longer escape. Then we are introduced to the three sheriffs, starting with Stillwell, a Mexican who is skilled at tracking, Dugan, who is arrogant and temperamental, and last Ketchum, the man who just shot someone. Ketchum is the most sadistic and inhumane of the three. This is clearly evident when he tramples on the injured man, even dragging him by the rope tied around his neck.
In a bad way.
The three were hunting for something the man's companion had stolen, and once Ketchum had secured the information, he approached the man calmly and coldly. Unfortunately, despite the man's pleas for his life, but Ketchum killed him by strangling him. The story then continues with an elderly farmer named Henry. After his wife passed away 10 years ago due to an illness, Henry had to become both a father and mother figure to his son named Wyatt. His late wife's grave was well maintained, showing that Henry was a good man who loved his wife with all his heart. Then we are introduced to a man named Al, who is Henry's brother-in-law, and he also owns a farm not far from there. After Al returned home, Henry and his son saw a horse walking alone without a rider. They examined it and found bloodstains indicating the horse's owner had been injured and may have fallen somewhere. Henry immediately told his son to return home even though he wanted to come with him. Henry himself planned to follow the horse's tracks to determine whether its owner was still alive or dead. After riding quite a distance, Henry finally found the body of a man who appeared to be the owner of the horse. Upon examination, the man was still alive despite suffering severe gunshot wounds. However, what surprised Henry was the discovery of a bag containing a large amount of money. Not wanting to get involved, Henry wanted to leave the man behind, but his conscience urged him to take the man with him and cover his tracks as best he could so that no one would notice what had happened. Upon arriving home, Henry immediately asked his son for help in treating the injured man. Henry realized that this man must be in trouble, or worse, he was being hunted by someone. Henry's suspicion turned out to be correct because this man was being chased by three people with sheriff badges, namely Ketchum and his two colleagues. The next morning, because the man was still unconscious, Henry tied his hands to the bed as a precaution, worried that he would become aggressive and harm his son. Henry then planned to return to the scene and ask his son to stay and watch over the man. All this time, Wyatt had been forbidden by his father to use firearms. So when Henry left, Wyatt secretly took the gun Henry had hidden and practiced shooting behind his house. Meanwhile, it turns out the injured man is named Curry, and we're then transported into his nightmare where everything is in chaos. Curry, who was still a child at the time, saw a criminal being shot dead, and he remembers the criminal saying, "Hold your head up high and you'll be fine." Back in the present, Henry has arrived near the scene and sees three men, namely Ketchum and his two companions, who have successfully tracked Curry's escape. Here we are shown how skilled Henry is, as despite being just an ordinary old farmer, he skillfully crawls among the reeds to observe the conversation between Ketchum and his two companions. Stillwell, who was an expert tracker, realized that Curry had passed through this place. He was amazed by the person who had covered the tracks and concluded that this person was no ordinary person. The neatness and precision used to cover the tracks clearly showed that an ordinary person would not have thought that far ahead. As they approach the reeds, they slowly make their way to a spot where someone seems to be watching them. However, when they arrive, there is no one there except for a trail of creeping footsteps, indicating that someone is indeed watching them from that spot. At home, Wyatt is confused when Curry wakes up, while Curry waking up in a stranger's house becomes wary. After successfully untying him, Curry grabs a knife and threatens Wyatt to stay still. When Curry woke up, he was tied to a chair, and afterward, Henry was seen heating a knife and preparing to stab it into the gunshot wound in Curry's shoulder to remove the bullet lodged in it.
He ain't no lawman, Paul.
Oh, I'm a goddamn lawman.
Curry himself claimed to be a lawman, also known as a sheriff, and he said he was being chased by 3 bandits disguised as sheriffs. Curry warned Henry to leave immediately because if the 3 bandits came, they would not hesitate to kill him. But the warning seemed too late because Ketchum and his 2 friends had already arrived. Henry quickly took his gun and told his son to stay away from the window and do nothing. For the first time, Ketchum and his 2 friends came face to face with an old farmer with an ordinary appearance. But this time, Ketchum was not as brutal as usual. Instead, he engaged the farmer in conversation and politely asked about someone who looked like Curry. He claimed that Curry was a criminal who had stolen a sum of money, and the 3 of them were law enforcement officers on duty to arrest Curry.
Lately goes by the name of Curry.
With his gun ready to fire, Henry replied that he had not seen the person in question. He claimed that he was just an ordinary farmer who did not want to get into trouble. Amazingly, Ketchum and his 2 friends immediately left without any tension or commotion. Ketchum and his 2 companions then rested in the area while discussing the old farmer they had just met. According to Ketchum, Henry held the gun in an unusual manner, unlike most farmers. They soon realized that Henry might have been lying and began to speculate about the possibility that Curry might be hiding in his house. Dugan was assigned to watch Henry's house and was warned not to act rashly because they were waiting for troops who were on their way to help capture Curry. Back home, Henry tried to investigate Curry's origins to confirm whether he was a sheriff. From Curry's story, he was indeed a law enforcement officer, but Henry was surprised to hear that Curry was born in New Mexico in a village called Pot Summer. This village was the scene of the death of a famous killer named Billy the Kid. It turns out that Billy the Kid is a true story. He is recorded to have killed around 27 people for no apparent reason, and these murders were committed when Billy was still very young. Interestingly, Curry was a living witness to Billy the Kid's death. The nightmare Curry experienced turned out to be a flashback from his past, as he had witnessed with his own eyes how Billy the Kid was shot in the chest, ending the story of the most famous outlaw cowboy in America. Henry released Curry after realizing that everything he said was true, but shortly afterwards, several shots were heard which turned out to be from Dugan. Although we know Ketchum told him not to act alone, Dugan chose to act first out of arrogance. Henry then grabbed his rifle and fought to protect his son and his home. As an ordinary old farmer, Henry seemed very calm in the face of this danger, as if he were accustomed to situations like this. Henry then fired into the crawl space just as Dugan crawled in, and Dugan, frightened, finally came out and was caught by Henry. Without hesitation, Henry killed Dugan by drowning his head in a puddle of wet earth, then threw his body into a pen for his pet pigs to eat.
The others will be coming.
The next morning, Ketchum and Stillwell go to Al's farm to find out who Henry really is, and when Al refuses to tell, he is beaten unconscious.
A lawman or something?
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Meanwhile, Henry and Wyatt were advised not to interfere because Curry was well aware that Ketchum would not stop hunting them. Especially after learning that Dugan was dead, Ketchum would slaughter them all. Curry, who still cared about Henry and his son, asked them to leave immediately and let him handle the problem himself. However, as they were about to leave, Henry and Wyatt were surprised by the appearance of Ketchum, who turned out not to be alone. He brought a troop of cowboys who were ready to destroy their residence.
Something!
Anybody home? See, your horses are already saddled.
A few moments later, Stillwell also appeared with Al, whose face was already battered, making Henry unable to stay silent. Wyatt was then given a gun as a precaution, while Henry made a deal with Ketchum and his men. This is where Henry's mentality was tested. He was asked to leave, but seeing his brother-in-law's battered face, he refused to leave just like that. Instead, he asked them to release Al and leave his residence immediately.
You do that, and I'll let you live.
You hear that, fella?
Ketchum, who had run out of patience, then shot Al in the head, causing Wyatt to suddenly come out and a shootout ensued. Henry, who had returned to the house, then said to his son, "Hold your head up high and you'll be fine." Hearing those words, Curry was shocked and finally realized that the old farmer who had helped him was the fastest gunman and killer known as Billy the Kid.
He's who?
Here we are.
Oh, what is he talking about?
Bonnie.
Henry casually walked out with his hands raised, and then he proved who he really was.
Smart choice, friend.
He was able to cock his pistol in 2 seconds, eliminating most of Ketchum's troops and leaving only a few men left. Henry was not only skilled with firearms, but he could also use a knife to slaughter them all. With a clever strategy, he killed the criminals one by one with only a knife and an axe, leaving only Stillwell still wandering around. Stillwell, who looked very frightened after seeing all his friends dead, decided to run away. However, Henry was waiting for him at the front, and with no other choice, Stillwell pretended to surrender.
Te quedes con el dinero. Déjame ir.
¡Hijo de la chingada!
Shortly thereafter, gunshots rang out from Ketchum's direction, and it turned out that he was still alive because Henry's previous shot had only grazed his right cheek. A chase ensued in the forest, but Ketchum was clearly no match for Henry, as Ketchum's shooting skills were far inferior to Henry's, who was accustomed to killing people. And in the end, when Ketchum ran out of bullets, he surrendered to be killed by the legendary cowboy. After everything was over, Henry then returned home, where luckily Wyatt was still fine and Curry was still alive. When Wyatt was told to get water, Henry, who was trying to treat Curry, accidentally saw a scar on his left arm, and finally it was revealed that Curry was in cahoots with Ketchum. The scar on his arm was a sign of an agreement between him and the Ketchum group. Curry was indeed a sheriff, but he was a law enforcer who participated in robbing the money. Because he was too greedy and wanted to have the money alone, Curry was willing to be hunted by Ketchum and his men. So why did Curry shoot Henry, who had clearly helped him? Well, it turns out that since childhood, Curry has always been haunted by the shadow of Billy the Kid who killed his parents. As a law enforcer who thirsts for honor, Curry was determined to kill Henry because he thought it was a matter of pride to be able to kill a legend like Billy the Kid. However, this feeling of pride did not last long because Wyatt then appeared and killed Curry on the spot. Henry then advises Wyatt to take good care of himself, and in his final moments, he also warns that when news of his death spreads, there will be rumors about his past life. Henry tells Wyatt not to believe the rumors. After burying his father's body right next to his mother's grave, Wyatt had no reason to stay there anymore. He chose to embark on a long journey to find himself, and the film ended.